Today we're going to cover sections 5.4 and 5.5. You may want to have a calculator handy. These sections contain no variables and are going to be done pretty quickly with a calculator. I'll show you how to do some of it by hand, and it'll be, again, pretty straightforward. So dividing a decimal by a whole number, we're going to place the decimal point in the quotient directly above the decimal point in the dividend. And then we're going to divide as you would a whole number. So again, you can throw this right into your calculator, but if you want to see how it's done, we're going to do a few. So we take our 89.1 divided by 2. So I'm going to write this as a long division problem. So put my 89.1 and then divide that by 2. So what they're talking about is moving this decimal right up above the current decimal in the problem and keeping it there. So we're going to divide as we normally would. 2 times 4 will give me 8. So I subtract that out. I have nothing left, and I can bring down my 9. 2 goes into 9 again 4 times. I have 1 left over, and I can bring down this 1. So I kind of ignored that there's a decimal there now, and I can think about 2 into 11 is 5 times. And notice that that's after the decimal now. So that's 10. I subtract again, I get 1. So I can add as many zeros as I want to after the problem and then keep using them. So this gives me 10 exactly, and 2 goes into 10 5 times exactly. So then this would be my decimal solution. Okay, so again, we're going to, if you want to pause it and try it on your own, we're going to take 502.96 and we're going to divide it by 8. Bring my decimal up. So 8 goes into 50 6 times. That's 48 with 2 left over. We're going to bring down that 2. So now 8 goes into 22 2 times. That would give me 16. And when I subtract that, I get 6. So the next step is to bring down my 9, and now I'm working after the decimal. So that would be 8. So that would give me 64. I subtract, I have 5, and I bring down my 6. Now 8 times 7 is 56 exactly. So this would be my answer. Okay, so these are going to have repeating decimals. So that means that if you put it into your calculator, you're going to see the same number over and over and over again. It's never going to end. At the very end of your calculator, it may look like it's rounding it up, but it's just cutting it off because it's never going to end. So it doesn't actually become, another number. It's just rounding indefinitely. So we're going to go ahead and divide it the same way. We have 3.5, and we're going to divide it by 3. So I'm going to bring my decimal up. 3 goes into 3 once. That's exact. Nothing left over. Bring down my 5. 3 goes into 5 again once. 2 left over. Can bring down a 0. 3 goes into 20. Let's see, 6 times. That's going to give me 2. And bring down another 0. And you can see this right here. 6 again. It's going to give me 18. I subtract it out. I've got another 2. So you're going to see that no matter how many times I do this, I can add as many zeros as I want. It's always going to give me 20. I'm only going to be able to use 6. So this is where it's going to repeat. So my answer, as soon as I see my repeating number, that's the number I'm going to stop at. So it's 1.16. And then to note that it's repeating, we put a bar over the number that's repeating. So it's just over the 6. So that shows that that 6 is going to repeat forever. And Alex will have a bar for you to use when you're doing these. So let's look at the next one. So I have 52, and I want to divide it by 6. So 52 divided by 6, I can do 8 to get 48. Subtract, and I have 4. So I've got a remainder. So I can add a decimal now, add a 0, and keep going. So 6 goes into 40 let's say 6 times, it'd be 36. And when I subtract, I'm going to end up with 4 again. So I can add another 0, I'm going to get 40. I could do another 6, which is going to give me 36. You can already see that it's going to repeat. I'll get another 4, and again you can see that it's going to repeat. So this answer would be just 8.6, and again that repeating over the 6. So if you want to pause and try this one on your own, so we've got 57 divided by 11. Well, 11 goes into 57 5 times to give us 55. Gives us 2 remaining. Make it a decimal, add a 0. So 11 can go into 20 just once. And when I subtract, I get 9. Add a 0. So 11 can go into 98 times. It's 88. I subtract, and I'm going to get 2. So I can get another 0, make that 20 again. So you can see I started here at 20. Again, I can do a 1 for an 11. I subtract, I get 9 again. And then I add another 0. So this one's going to have a repeating pattern. So this one right here, when I get the 90, again, I can do 8. I get 88. Subtract, I get 2. So then that would be 20 again. So you're going to see that no matter what I do, it's going to be 181818. So my repeating decimal would be 5.18. Because the 1/8's repeating, we put the bar over the whole repeating piece, which is going to be the 1 and the 8. So just watch those. Okay, so a decimal that stops is called a terminating decimal. So 2.31 is a terminating decimal. When I put the line over it, now I'm showing it as a repeating decimal. So I want you guys to see the difference between those two. Okay, so here we're going to talk about dividing when the divisor, so that outside number, is not a whole number, so it's a decimal. So we're going to move the decimal point in the divisor to the right until you make it a whole number, so however many spaces you need to move it. Then we're going to move the decimal point in the dividend, that's the inside, to the right the same number of places as in step 1. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and finish it up the way we did. Place the decimal point in the quotient directly above the decimal point in the dividend, and then we're going to divide like we would. Okay, this is going to give us the same answers if I use the calculator. It's just going to make some of these a little bit longer, so you're going to have to just kind of pay attention to these. Okay, so this one, to kind of make it simplified here, first I'm noticing I have a negative and a negative. So right away, I know that this is going to yield a positive, so I can kind of forget about the signs for now. So what I have is I have 42.9, and I'm going to divide that by 0.25. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of this decimal, and if I move it to the right twice, it creates the number 25, which is nice and whole. Now, if I do that on the outside, I have to do it the same amount of spaces on the inside. So I now have 4290. Now I can add my decimal now or just wait to see if I need it. So now I'm going to go ahead and divide like I was before. So I can go ahead and do 25 into 42. That's only going to go in once. And when I subtract that, I get 17. And I can bring down my 9. So 25 goes into 179 7 times. That's going to give me 175. And when I subtract, I only have 4 left. So I can bring down my 0. 25 goes into 40 just once. I subtract that and I have 15. So now I do need to add back in that decimal, add another 0. And now 25 can go into 150 exactly 6 times, which gives me 150. So that would be my solution. Feel free to check yourself in the calculator. Okay, so this one again, I want to make sure that I have whole number on the outside. So I need to move it over 1, 2, 3 spaces. So that means that this moves over 1, 2, 3 spaces, adding in 2 zeros. So I now have 5 and 2700. So I'm going to go ahead and start dividing. 5 goes into 27 5 times, which is 25. And that leaves me with 2, and I can bring down a 0. So 5 goes into 24 times exactly. So we have to, because we have another 0, we're going to add a 0, because if I go ahead and try and multiply to check 54 times 5, it's just going to give me 270. So I need that other 0 to get 2,700. So my answer would be 5,000 or 540. Okay, so let's talk about rounding. So when I'm rounding this, I'm going to round to the indicated place value. I've got the tens place and the hundreds place. So in this one, the tens place would be the 7. So I'm looking at the 2. So this would become 59.7. My hundreds place, tens hundreds, is the 2, and I'm looking at the 8. So to round to the hundredths, it becomes 59.73. So just be cautious with this. And then of course I can go to the thousands place. The thousands place is the 8, looking at the 1. So that becomes 59.728. So I want you to round the quotient to the indicated place value. So here we're going to divide, and then this time it's telling us to round to the hundredths place. So in this problem, we're going to go ahead and take our 42.68 divided by 5.1. Okay, so what we'll need to do is we'll need to move this over by 1 and this over by 1. So I have 51 into 426.8. So I'm going to move my decimal up to the top. Okay, so 51 is not going to go into just 42, so I'm going to have to think about 426. And I can divide that by 51 or think about how many times, and I get 8. So if I go back and I think about 51 times 8, I'm getting 408. Subtract that out, and 426 minus 408 is going to give us 18. Okay, so it's smaller than 51, I'm doing okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down my 8. So now I'm going to think about 51 going into 188. So that's going to go in about 3 times. So 51 times 3 is going to give me 153. And so when I subtract those out, I get 35. Okay, so now I'm thinking about adding a 0. And now I'm thinking about 350. So 350 divided by 51 is going to give me about 6. So I'm thinking 6 will go into it about 6 times 51. It's 306. There we go. Okay, so when I subtract those two, I get 44. Now it says hundredths. I'm already at the hundredths, but I need to go one more to figure out what I'm going to round it to. So this is 440. Excuse me. So let's go with 8. That's 408. Okay, so I don't need to go any further. I need to know the hundredths place, which is the 6. The 8 is going to tell me what to do, so my answer would become 8.37. That's my rounded answer to the nearest hundred. So make sure that you go out one space further so that you can always see if you need to round it up or keep it the same. So don't forget to go one space further. Okay, so here, this is a question I've seen on the test before. So the amount that Brooke owes on her mortgage, including interest, is this much. Okay, her monthly payment is this much. So we want to know how many months does she still need to pay. So this is a pretty big number. So I would just go straight to the calculator. We're going to take that 40,540 $1,062.08. And we're going to divide that by her monthly payment, which is $965.24. So if I'm just using my calculator, I don't need to get rid of decimals, but I could. So when I divide this out, I get the number 42. So 42 months is what she still owes. Now, we want to know how many years is this. So in order to decide how many years this is, we're going to take 42 and divide it by 12, because there's 12 months in a year. And so we would have 3.5 years is what she would still owe. Okay, so here we want to go ahead and write fractions as decimals. So if we have these fractions as decimals, we're going to just divide the numerator by the denominator and continue the division process until the quotient is a terminating decimal or a repeating pattern is recognized, right? So you can also use your second and PRB key if you have a TI-30X, or you can use that toggle key that's right above the enter to change it. So it's up to you. So it's the top divided by the bottom. I'm going to need to put in a decimal right away because 25 can't go into 4. So I'm thinking about 4 divided by 25 is going to give me 0.16. So I'm going to do that in my calculator just to make it much easier for myself and not worry about it. Okay, again, I'm going to take this. It's going to be negative, so my new answer is going to be negative. And I'm going to take the top divided by the bottom. Okay, so the top divided by the bottom, if you want to see this done by hand, it's going to be a 1. 5 goes in once. 5 goes in twice. So I get 1.2. So either way, you can do it by hand or you can do it by calculator. Calculator is going to work really fast for you. When you have something like this, again, we're going to take our top and divide it by the bottom. So we have 5 divided by 8. So I can add my decimals. 8 goes into 50 6 times. I got 2 left over. I can add another 0. 8 goes into 20 twice. I can subtract. I've got 4 left over. Add another 0. So 8 goes in, or 8 times 5 is 40 exactly. So this is my decimal for just this portion. So when I have a whole number, the whole number becomes the whole number in the decimal. And so now it's 4.625. So don't forget that you have that whole number as part of your final decimal. It's just not part of the division. Okay, so we're going to divide this one, and then this time we're going to round it to the tenths place. So this one's going to keep going. So I could take my 3 and I could divide it by 11. And just to keep this a little bit short, what I'm going to do is I can just add my decimal. 11 goes into 30 just twice. That's 22. Subtract it out. I can do 30 minus 22, and I get 8. So 8 is going to have a 0, so I now have 80. 11 can go into 80 7 times. That's 77. And I can stop there. I just need the tenths. This 7 is going to round that 2 up to a 3, so my answer would be 0.3 as my rounded solution. Okay, so I'm going to write a decimal as a fraction. So again, I can use this, the toggle key in my calculator or the second PRB key in my calculator to change it back and forth. Or I can write it as a fraction saying it's 1 and 6/10. So we did this in a previous chapter. So it's 6/10. I can reduce the top and the bottom by 2. So this reduces to 1 and 3/5. Okay, so we did this previously, just a review. So a negative 2.25 is a negative 2 and 25 over 100 because that 5 is in the hundredths place. And that reduces to a negative 2 and 1 over 4. So again, you can use your calculator, you can do it by hand. It's completely up to you. For these, again, no variables. I recommend doing it by calculator. If you're going to do it by calculator, check yourself. I'll do it in pieces here Again, I'm not going to make it super long. So we've got 10.42 minus 7.52. And if I subtract those two, I get just 2.9. Now that's going to stay in parentheses squared. My next step is to take 2.9 and square it. So if I take 2.9 and square it, I get 8.41. So 11.38 minus 8.41 is going to subtract and give us a 2.97. Okay, so you can do it in pieces, you can do it all in your calculator, it's completely up to you. This one, you're going to have to make a decision, and I'm thinking that working with decimals is easier than fractions. So I could do this part, I could multiply out. I've got 1/5 times 1/5, I do my square first. So it's 1/8 times 1 over 25. And if I want to work that out, that's 1 over 200 plus 6.5. Now, I have an option. I can either change this one into a fraction that contains a denominator of 200, or whatever I get, or I could go ahead and change this over to a decimal. Changing this over to a decimal is going to make it easier. So I'm going to make this 1 divided by 200, right? That's 200. And that gives me a 0.005. So this makes a pretty simple decimal to add together. So my final answer here would be 6.505. So again, unless it tells you specifically how they want it in decimal or fraction, decimal or a fraction answer would do. This one tells you specifically to round to the nearest hundredth, so we know that we want this as a decimal answer. So again, it'd be really simple to put that into your calculator. If you just put in 7/12 divided by 2.6, you're going to end up with 0.22435, etc. So if I want the hundredth, this is my hundredths place. The 4 is not enough to push it up, so it's just going to be 0.22 as my rounded solution. And that's it for this lesson. Give me a text or message me or email me if you have any questions.